Today, we'll speak with Martha Breil about McGuireWoods' commitment to the implementation of a large collaboration system. I asked Martha to describe the unique challenges of selecting, implementing, and rolling out such a system when the majority of her firm is working from home. Welcome to Law Firm Weekly. It's good to have you here. Martha Breil is the knowledge management leader at McGuireWoods. She's part of the Client Sync team, which supports the firm's clients' value initiatives, focusing on helping the firm's lawyers deliver the highest level of client service in a cost-effective and efficient manner. Prior to entering the legal industry, Martha was a knowledge manager for a Big Four accounting firm and a Fortune 50 corporation. Martha, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jai. Glad to be here.
How is it working from home, by the way? I know everybody's doing it, and it seems like it's a natural thing, I guess, after 3 months or so. But, what are the things that are starting to wear thin, especially as it comes to collaboration with your peers and your coworkers?
I was relatively used to working remotely at least part of the time, so that hasn't been hard for me. It is harder for just general communication for others who aren't used to it. When you transition all in a week from having everybody co-located to having everybody not co-located and then throw in a pandemic and children, it gets really complicated really fast. So it has been a challenge for everybody. I think 3 months in, the things that we were just happy that worked initially, like just anything, right? We had connectivity. That was like massive success, and no one was going to bother anyone in technology support unless something was like fundamentally blowing up just because they needed to focus on priorities. And now fast forward 3 months in, and we're really finding like the Jabber like functionality for messaging was great, but it's insufficient if this is going to be a sustainable work environment, which for a lot of us it's going to be. I mean, we're not going back to the office as a regular thing organization wide until earliest October, and it's going to vary based on where you are. So this isn't going away anytime in the near future, and the technology we need to support is more prevalent now than it was 3 months ago.
Absolutely. And yeah, we will get to more specifics around the collaboration system that you're developing at your firm. But before I go there, I want to go to some of the basics here. I mean, I've been in the knowledge management side of law firms for a very long time. And it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm wondering nowadays, in principle, how does it translate to focusing on practice specific solutions? What is the practical usage of knowledge management? If you can, I opened myself to an hour discussion, as I know from talking to other knowledge management people, but if you can kind of quickly say, what does it mean practically nowadays?
In knowledge management, I'll just say it means different things to different people, and it's all valid. It just really needs to be contextual, what you need in your organization, and I won't dive into it because we would be talking about that for hours. But for what it means at McGuireWoods is really connecting with the people who are practicing law, the lawyers, to find out what their needs are and to find processes. It doesn't necessarily need to be technology. Oftentimes it is. And just to kind of be advocates for them, be almost a clearinghouse for their requests. Like they don't know who to call, they call my group, ideally. I mean, we're a large law firm. We have over 1,000 lawyers, so it's harder than it sounds. But in my organization, it really is efficiency, effectiveness, client value initiatives that we can help deliver to support the practice of law.
And I know you mean it when you talk about client focus. Based on our discussions, it's something that is top of mind. It is sometimes a bit overused and kind of politically correct to say it's all client focused. Everything we do is client focused. And it is at the end of the day. But how does it being incorporated into your solutions day in and day out? What does it practically mean? Is it at the level of requirements gathering when you talk to lawyers and trying to understand how to translate what they need to client value? What does it really mean?
It does mean that, and oftentimes our lawyers bring things to us, and then we ask a lot of whys, like why do you need this? Who's asking? Why do you need this? And the answers that most closely align with, like, our clients are asking for this, they really need this, they're having trouble interacting and sharing work products with us, they're having a hard time understanding the status on their matters, that kind of request gets bubbled up. So that's just one practical way that we use to try to align all of the many requests, because we can't do it all. I mean, we are a very small team. Knowledge management in general is never going to be large enough. So we have to prioritize, and client value, client facing solutions that may be, it's always a blend, right? But solutions that may benefit us internally and benefit the client are always going to get a priority bump in our list of projects, as opposed to something that is fundamentally just an internal like solution. And I can't think of any specific example off the top of my head, but that's kind of the framework we use. It's not super scientific, it's not super sophisticated, but if you ask the right questions and you have the right conversations and you try to have like almost a coaching relationship with the lawyers, to ask them, well, if you don't really know how this might benefit the client, perhaps you should have a conversation with your client about their challenges, which is not as natural as it seems for a lot of lawyers. So that's how we try to do our best to make it not just something we say and something we do.
So, talking about precious resources and trying to focus in the right areas, obviously, there are decisions to be made right now at law firms. Many of them are difficult decisions, not the least of which is where to kind of put the resources and where to
Right.
invest the money. It's interesting for me to understand why is it that in a time that law firms are scaling back, uh, McGuire Woods decided that investing in the collaboration system you'll talk about is important.
Well, we are like most firms and organizations, we are definitely scaling back. That's true in our spend, but we want to be strategic about it, and we want to make sure we don't make short-term decisions that might position us badly long term. So taking a longer view of where what we need to really support client value and support our ability as a firm to share our intellectual capital by communicating effectively with each other. The obvious answer to that was a more rich, more sophisticated collaboration solution than we had right now. When we were all in the office, we had challenges even then because we are geographically dispersed. But you add the whole pandemic to the mix, and it became much more apparent after a few months in that email was killing people, and things were getting dropped, and it was stressing people out, and it's just no fun to go through that email bin. Plus, it's not really a collaboration tool. It's not designed for real collaboration. There's a lot of tools on the market right now that are, and we had been looking at them prior to the pandemic. We decided to make it more of a priority and bump that project up on the ones that we are seriously evaluating this year. We just are beginning our pilot after a long evaluation process on what was in the marketplace.
So, what are you hoping to achieve that will affect efficiencies and let's call it operational performance or collaborative performance for this chasm, that is probably going to be about a year or so long before we can even think
Right.
about coming back? And what is it that will linger? Or is there really a difference between the two?
I I think the the main difference is we don't have a lot of good options right now. So walking down the hall is not going to be an option in the near future. And in order to replicate that, some solution with a like kind of a space where lawyers can have their virtual team rooms and wikis, whatever you want to call it. There's many different names for it, but a collaboration space that's designed for their team that can be fluid, so you can invite other people in as you need. As we all know, lawyers don't necessarily work with the same lawyers all the time. They work and they build their teams based on the matter. So something that's flexible and allows them to have a virtual workplace that replicates as close as you can, just going down the hall to the office and saying, hey, do you have 5 minutes on this? So a technology that supports that in a virtual space was something that we thought was very valuable. In addition to that, since I was focusing on client value earlier, it was also like obvious that we needed something that was more effective than what we had to help collaborate with our clients. So the tools that we were looking at, that we prioritize, and the one we chose, allows us to also have that same collaborative experience, not just on the document side, but on perhaps the communication side with our clients as well. And we wanted one solution to do both because, as you know, the change management and adoption to use multiple tools is just silly, and it basically shoots you in the foot. You don't get the adoption you need. So that's what kind of drove us to really try to move this forward and really prioritize those two features above all else.
And this makes total sense. I'm kind of wondering to what extent the current situation, and you've alluded to it, is necessitating this kind of level of collaboration, not the least with your clients, and will possibly catalyze the adoption compared to, say, normal times where there's maybe less of an impetus to take on such a system, not just on the firm side, but also on the client side. Are you hoping that this will actually speed it up?
I do think it will speed it up, and it's the lawyers are asking for this even more vociferously than they were prior to the pandemic, and they were asking for it before too, to be honest. But like I was just on a call with ILTA yesterday on virtual courtrooms and virtual trials, and like even the judges there were saying, lawyers don't like technology. That's really not why they went into practice law, but we have to figure this out, and they've been great at it. I mean, they've had to figure out how to have Zoom trials, and how to make the courtroom experience work to some extent. I mean, they're not doing jury trials yet, but to some extent they have to make that work. And I think the same mindset goes to the collaboration software we're looking at, because there really isn't an option except for email, and we already know that that's not cutting it. So it's nothing like having, necessity is the mother of invention. It's true. I mean, we have to figure this out. So the investment and the skin in the game is a lot more than they would have had like 3 months ago. So that helps us out tremendously, because as anyone who's worked anywhere, it's not just law firms, with technology, technology, the selection is the easy part. The getting people to adopt it and to embrace it and make it part of their workflow is incredibly difficult. So at least I think that makes the whole change management and adoption piece for myself and for others as well much easier, which
Now,
is, we'll take what we can get out of this pandemic, right?
absolutely. I hate to use the term silver lining because it's so devastating for so many people and at levels that
Yeah.
we're only starting to
Yeah.
understand. But yeah, that is definitely going to change many of the things that are going to stick around. And actually, coming to that issue of what's going to stick around, you told me in our preparatory conversation about a conversation you had with one of your lawyers. And he said, I think it was a he who said that um, he can see how things will change beyond this chasm permanently in a way of spending less time on the road. And that collaboration is something that people will get used to. And that will be actually a positive thing for everybody involved, not the least of which is, the client.
Right, right. Yes, he did make that comment. A couple of them actually have, and it was just along the lines of, we had this mentality until 3 months ago that in order to service our clients, especially in the trial litigation world, that you'd have to like get on the plane and go visit the client. Well, visit might be the wrong term, but spend some face time with your client. And now that that's not a possibility at all, at least not right now. It might be a little bit more than it was a couple months ago, but it's less of a possibility. The benefits of that for the client, the lawyers can work more effectively than at their desk than they can while on a plane. So that's adding more, like, just they're better able to focus, right? More value for the client that way. The other aspect of it is it's less expensive to do the work virtually than it is to do it in person. If it involves, as it often does, flying internationally or flying across the country, that's expensive. And last but not least, it also, for our lawyers who work a lot of hours, it adds a little bit more work-life balance to their life, and who doesn't want that?
So that's a really good point, and I'd like to wrap up with a question about your selection process. I will link below, right here, the list of platforms that you've evaluated. I know that, as you've mentioned, you went through a fairly lengthy process, and you had like a nice matrix of criteria. But I guess what I'm interested in is if you can glean in the 30 seconds that we have left here, maybe the top 2 or 3 criteria that were critical above all else. I mean, there's so much that goes into a selection process such as this, but I'd be interested to know, what is it that is so crucial in your mind to a successful collaboration system, at least from the outset?
I think more you have to know your users and you have to know who your target users are. And I mean, like, is it the partners? Is it is it associates? Are we looking to have a solution for all lawyers or just litigation versus transactional? And you really have to know that going in, because that informs the priority of your requirements, or it should, if you want to have a tool that's adopted and used the way you want it. It's a big investment, so I would strongly suggest getting to know your users if you don't know them already. What a lot of technology people find to be the most feature-rich, functional-wise, is just not something lawyers find useful for how they want to practice, and they're not going to change but so much how they practice law to accommodate technology. The technology has to meet them at least part of the way to where they are right now in order to be adopted and successful. So more than any specific feature, I would focus on making sure you know who your target audience is and what they are going to embrace and what they won't, because otherwise you're just going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and have more shelfware. Once you understand what your audience wants, I think it's important to understand what your technical constraints are, what your budget constraints are, and be realistic. Some of these solutions are really expensive. Some of them are only in the cloud. Some of them are reasonable. So if you have a smaller firm, I would suggest looking for some of the less expensive tools, because they seem to have a little bit more flexibility and value add. If you're a larger firm and you need to use this across a number of different practice groups and different types of law, then maybe a tool that's more of the Cadillac versus the Volkswagen would be more appropriate to you. So I don't think there's one feature that did it for us, but we did select a tool that did the best at meeting the broadest range of our requirements. It had to be mobile. It had to meet lawyers at least part of the way where they were, so they didn't have to rethink a whole model of working. It had to allow them to collaborate with other lawyers, which is what I said before, like in a sort of wiki or like kind of the virtual water cooler like manner. Those are the most important things, and there's a whole long list of features that are important beyond that. But if I had to pick a few, that's what I think.
Well, that's great, Martha, and I think we're going to leave it at that. That was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us, and maybe in the future you'll join us again to talk a little more about the pilot and the rollout and how it went. I think some of our audience may go, well, why aren't you telling us what did you choose? When I think at this point you're kind of saying, hey, let's just do the pilot first and then determine where we're going from there, and then you can share who you chose. But anyways, thank you so much, Martha, for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.